Hi guys, new speed paint time. This time around I want to do a bit more of a process-centered video, so that's what this is going to be. For the first order of business, I'm going to be making both the sketch and the line art digitally, and I'm going to be coloring this traditionally, which is not something that I usually do. So I'm just exploring different illustration ideas here. I wanted to do something like nice and summery. You can see the early idea of this holding an ice cream, but I wanted to do this pull float thing maybe another time. I do end up wanting to keep this simple because I want this to be more of a focus on practicing with markers rather than being too detail heavy or anything, because I really want the rendering to be the star of this show. Sketching digitally has always been a challenge for me. I really don't use stabilizers unless it's for things like really precise line art, which you will see. Like, it is useful, for example, for things like this to have a symmetry tool, but I find that even without any stabilization settings, every digital art program is going to have at least some kind of even like imperceptible lag that does make a big difference for me. Stabilizing that with like much thinner and precise line art later on will make it less like obvious that I think it's hard for me to sketch digitally, but maybe it's not obvious at all. I don't know. The process is just like very strange for me. I started drawing traditionally, which is not the case for most of my friends that do art, which I find pretty interesting. Anyways, I'm finishing up the sketch here. You can see that's like all pretty much done, and now I'm going at it with really thin line art. For this really thin style of line art, I'm pretty much going between the basic pen at full stabilization as well as the curve tool, just keeping that at like 2 or 3 pixels, like not even. I'm really not trying to do any variation in line art here. The next steps are basically just cleaning up the line art, making it gray for the printing, and printing directly to my marker paper. I let the printed paper dry for about 15 to 20 minutes before I start putting in the color. For coloring, I only use alcoholic markers, and I mostly use copics, so I'm going to be talking about the different color codes and stuff that I use. I start with a base of R0000 to start mapping the warmer areas of the face, and E41 for the rest. I create this kind of flood so that I can spread original subtle gradients that I want first and foremost, like the blush. So once the area is nice and wet, I go in it with R20, which is a light pink color, and I go back and forth between that and the base colors to smooth it out. Then I'm going in with this Blick brand marker. It is the 55% warm gray to start planning out some of the shadows and stuff. For this piece, I'm really trying to approach markers similarly to how someone might tackle like glazing with oil paints. Besides the first base layer, I'm really applying these colors very gently. It's kind of hard to tell in the sped up footage, but I'm like very barely touching the page, like I'm feathering it in. But for example, for something like this with the base color of the mouth, that is just a much more direct fill. But I go back and forth between the shadows and the blush a lot, just with like new lighter layers of color, just to make sure that the end result looks really clean. Really, most of this is going to be just going back and forth between the same colors. I'm plotting a lot of those shadows with that warm 55 gray color just because I think it's a really nice marker. I'm starting to plan some of the shading for the hair, which is going to be a bit of an issue. I'm going to go back and forth between it a lot because as I was making this, I couldn't actually figure out like how I wanted to apply the colors for shading the hair. So for the hair and for a lot of the teal parts in this piece, I'm using a prismacolor PM32, the 41 blue, which is a cerulean blue, I believe, from Blick, and the lighter tones are Copic's BG34 and YG11. This is a subtle range of hues from a more pure blue to more yellow-green and the stuff in between. And I think this small variation will be helpful, especially considering how much of this piece will be teal. It'll be a matter of applying these colors differently. So if you can see the eyes, which are using the same colors as the hair, I'm applying the blue as sort of the main color, not only because it's the darkest, it'll be a good point of attention for the piece, but it just shows that like how you apply color is a very important part of how you organize a piece. I shouldn't say they're entirely the same colors though, because I am going over the eyes a little bit with a BG78, I believe, which is the bronze Copic tone. For a lot of my shading experience with markers, it's really balancing between whether you want to blend things out on a wet area or if you want a like sharper, cleaner tone on a dry part. So there really is a difference between applying on a wet and dry area. Like for the neck, I just blended some of the previous skin tones I was using before. Also here you can see more of my confusion with how to plot the hair, because this time I'm plotting with the lighter color instead of the darker one. It really is going to be, again, this part was such a pain for me. I don't know why, because I actually had a practice sheet I did before this to warm up. So similarly how I'm tackling the teal parts with not just teal markers, but also blue and more greenish yellow ones, I want to get the skin with different variation too. So I'm hitting some of the shaded areas with a purple tone, VO1, I believe, which is like a light grayish purple, and also just going over the skin again to brighten it up a little bit, which is going to be a recurring theme. And going over the hair again, also making sure I'm getting color variations in there. Not just with the teals and the blues, but that YG11 does add a really nice pop. I also end up going with a lighter blue, like a true blue marker towards the tips of it, because the neck area is going to be a very dark part of the piece. It's going to have a dark blue color, and I want that part of the hair to be lighter near it for like some nice visual oomph, as well as the fact that I don't want the piece to be too muddy, since it's not going to have very dark parts to begin with, really, besides the eyes and the collar. By this point, I definitely have a bit of a clearer idea for what I want the hair to end up looking like, so I definitely feel a bit more confident going into that. It might be hard to tell with the sped up footage, but one of the ways that I am tackling the shading, besides the kind of like glazing technique, is, well, you could kind of see it on that bang there, but when I'm lightly feathering the marker, I'm kind of like etching, really, like trying to get the form in, as well as just like, it's an easier way to lightly apply color. It ends up being a bit visible on the face later on, actually, but I like how it looks. I like when you can tell the texture of a material that's actually being used, which is also why I prefer traditional. I really want to practice with this kind of style of anime art because it's one that I grew up with and is really nostalgic for me. Not just like different anime and manga that I grew up with, but there was this artist named Paige Rorick who started these apps called like Pagey Draw, where she would have like her own anime characters and upload tutorials on how to draw different of those characters, as well as how to use copic markers and stuff. Those were really influential on me as a kid and are a big reason why I love copics and like marker art to this day. Back to the character though, so I'm just gonna hit the body and stuff now. I'm just focusing on the rest of the skin, which is the fingers visible from the fingerless gloves, as well as the shoulders. Going at it with these sort of like ringlets for the blush, which I also did before, which I think just makes a nice lighting effect. And I'm going to be doing something similar for the rest of the body later, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So similarly with the eyes, the gloves and the like kind of shirt part are supposed to be white, but I don't want any like pure white things in the piece, because when you're working with traditional materials, especially something like markers, you really need to carefully plot out like your lightest lights and your darkest darks. So those will be covered either in that warm gray color or in a much lighter color like a BG000. And here I'm just layering more of the skin again with some lighter tones, and as well as going in at the mouth and stuff and just kind of trying to make that a bit more shaded and robust and stuff. And again, going back at it with some of that V12 and VO1 color, just to add a bit more depth to the shadows and stuff, because it's not like there's a lot of purple in this piece anyways. Okay, so going into these like poofy sleeve ring thingies, they're supposed to be shiny, and again, it's the same teal colors as the hair and the eyes, so layering the colors is what's going to make a difference here. The darkest tones are going to go first, and in the lighter area, I use the BG34 marker for the base, but I leave a hole so that I can fill it with YG11, which creates like a ringlet of light or something. I think it gives a cool effect of there being some kind of spotlight nearby or overhead or something. I think it adds a nice texture difference. And I'm also going in with the top and the gloves and just layering some more shadows there. Again, much of the same with the warm gray color and the VO1. And here I'm going in with the collar. This is like some random like Bic marker that I've just kind of had forever, just like a nice dark blue. It does match the Cerulean 41 Blick marker well, but I'm layering some more BG78 and some other darker colors here just to make sure that stays actually dark. And yeah, you can see the Cerulean 41 is what I use for most of that fill. And here I'm just going in at the headphones, which are the most desktop dog part of this piece. If you aren't familiar with the character, he's one I've drawn before, one that I'm working on. I really liked how this part turned out for the screen. I layered the YG11 color with some yellow and some more yellow greens, and then doing the same kind of ring lighting effect, adding in the blues for the eyes and the like base antenna thing, as well as the like earmuff part. I actually need to design these headphones a bit better because I always end up designing them kind of from the side like this for illustrations, and I end up confusing myself. I did get a 3D model commissioned of this character a while ago, and I really like how they interpreted the headphones because I'm sure they were similarly like, how the hell does this part even like apply, but it turned out really good. But rambling aside, I'm just finishing up the main part of the hair here, and the back part is a bit more flat, but that's intentional because I don't want everything to be too detailed. But yeah, here I'm just going in at more details, speaking of which, doing the little star emblem, waiting for things to dry because the paper was super wet at this point. I wish I layered some of the shadows on the like chest, like top area a bit better when it wasn't so wet, but oh well, what can you do? Reiterating this point that I spoke on before, but organizing the lightest and darkest parts of Copic marker drawings is like the hardest part for me. As I was working on the skin and stuff, I kept being very nervous that I was going to overwork it and make it too dark, too bright, like in places that I didn't want it to, because also when the paper's this wet, it's kind of anyone's guess as to how it's going to go. So yeah, I literally just grabbed a spoon for the reference for this point. I do kind of wish that I hit it with like a bit more of a colorful thing instead of making it like a silver spoon, because I think like doing like a yellow plastic spoon would have like popped a bit better. But I am not just going at this with gray markers, but also adding some subtle blues like where the collar is, as well as like a little bit of pink tones near where it's hitting the skin, just to make it look slightly reflective, although I think it shows up a little bit better in the final piece than it does in this recording. Just going at it now with it a bit drier to highlight some of the shadows, which is a bit of an oxymoron, but oh well. But tragically, I forgot to record like the actual coloring process for the ice cream, which is sad because I think it turned out really well. So for the ice cream, I went at it with a lot of like yellow and beige tones, as well as that same base for the warm gray, and just referencing actual pictures of ice cream throughout. And while I do think the shading on that turned out well, and I am glad I got the whipped cream shading process because I really liked how that turned out, I wish I actually referenced a bit better for the shape of the ice cream in the sketching phase, since I think it would have been a bit more successful, but that's okay. So the ice cream itself was a mix of E30 and E41 for the lighter bits, and E13 and Y21 to define stuff a bit further, with a V91 color to define some of the shadows a bit. Here I'm just working on the like hockey sticks that are shooting out of it, and those are supposed to be like random candies or gumdrops on the top. I honestly didn't think about it that far, but it's fine. I'm glad I didn't forget to record shading the glass though, which is what I really liked, because I wanted this to be kind of like an ice cream float, right? So I originally start layering some light colors, B41, E41, BG11, BG34, and BO2, which are basically these like light tones and then the teal ones. I'm working from the inside out to just slowly blend the colors instead of doing one big base at once. That darker color, the darker aqua color, BG15, is just to fill in the rest. and still going back and forth with some of the other colors to make sure the transition is smooth and stuff. And with BG72 and a VO2, I'm adding a bit of shading and dots and stuff just to like pronounce the glass and all that. I wanted to keep the background bright but still simple, so I'm just going at it with a really bright yellow marker, YO2, and just gonna do like a bit of a plaid design background. I then go in with this like other prismacolor yellow, which is just slightly darker, just to actually make those like checkered part of the plaid bits. I'm not really sure what that's called. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that I printed the line art in gray in case I wanted to go over it later, which I do end up doing, but I got so nervous about it that I ended up going to the highlights first instead, which I plotted out with a white colored pencil to do in white acrylic paint. And I don't know what it was about the paint. It didn't end up really like applying how I wanted it to. I think it was the brush, not to blame my own tools or anything, because I ended up fixing this digitally later anyways. But yeah, it wasn't helping my nerves for going at it with the line art because I was super freaking nervous. I'm doing the highlights pretty sparingly because I don't want it to like overwhelm the piece, though I do add a fun amount of digital effects later, which I think is fine. I ended up going over it with pen to not fully outline it, but just to like outline the contour of the different shapes. So like, for example, for the hair, I'm just doing the very basic contour, not the inside parts with the lines or anything. I think it turned out really well. I think I got like that balance that I wanted, that it lets the rendering that I did pop without like taking away from it, but still adding a nice like, I don't know, I think the lines turned out really well. And doing the ice cream was such a fun part because it's definitely the palest part. So just seeing that like little black outline around it was really satisfying to have that come together. Once that's all done, it's time to scan and edit it. So I was just gonna do some minor edits for touch-up. Oh, here's the scan, by the way, at least the cropped version of the raw scan. I was gonna do a bunch of the editing in Clip Studio Paint, and I wanted to record it just like a regular screen recording instead of the in-app like time-lapse that Clip Studio makes. But that did not work. The screen recording thing that I do, because I literally just do this on my laptop, it was not great, so it's gonna lag a lot. You're not going to see really the full process, but that's okay. Like, most of the footage was straight up unusable, so I'm just gonna have like flashes kind of what was going on, but basically what I was doing was adding some touch-ups, so like to a bit of bleeding for the markers that wasn't the most pretty. I just wanted to do some minor touch-ups for that, a little bit of color editing for the main piece, and the main part of the show is adding fun like digital flares and stuff for the background, but a lot of it is just like touching up the highlights that I kind of failed to do with paint. Yeah, you can see some of that cleanup here and stuff, where I'm just using like a low opacity, low density pencil brush actually to just like clean up some of the colors. Just going at it like carefully and making sure that things match, making sure I'm zooming out, which these clips don't show because the recording kept like completely imploding on itself anytime I dared to zoom in and zoom out quickly. So now I'm just going in at it with some of like the fun digital effects that I was mentioning. I really like Clip Studio Paint's like default effect brushes, especially their little like star ones, which I'm now kind of second guessing myself because I download so much stuff from the Clip Studio Paint store that it might not be default, but whatever. I think it's really cute. I think it adds a lot of like nice charm. I'm also playing with different gradients and overlays, different colors to do, and different opacities, like all that stuff. I will never know like the blending layers by heart, so it really is just a matter of like clicking through it each time. I'm also just going over it with different halftone effects and stuff like that to add like a bit of texture difference. My favorite thing to do is applying that tone all in black and then putting it as an overlay layer and then lowering the opacity quite a bit. I think it makes like the nicest colors and it just matches like whatever your base stuff is the best without having to like individually cover each section in a different color and all that. So here I'm just adding a bit of text. It just says like, let's share and so yummy. I think it's just a nice addition to the composition, and like a lot of this art I associate with having like a lot of text on it, especially when it's text with like, the text itself is colorful, there's that like blurry white border around it. I don't know, I'm just like, I'm reaching into like the recesses of my brain for this one. For the background, it's pretty simple, just a rainbow gradient with a halftone like dot tile effect. And then finally, it's finished after digital and traditional and then digital again. Here is the piece. I think it turned out really cute. I'd want to work on more pieces like this again in the future, obviously, but also more videos like this, so I have something for Desktop Dog on this page already, but I really am becoming much more serious about this project, and my friend Sasha, shout out, gave me an idea that doing speed paint videos would be helpful. I think I would keep more process-based things like this for like exclusive things like Patreon later down the line, but I'm also going to be working on a version of this video that is a bit shorter and doesn't have any of the narration, and will just have music and stuff. So look forward to that, look forward to more speed paints in the future. If you want to know more about Desktop Dog and stuff, feel free to check out the links in the description, and thank you so much for watching.